So a tiny bit, first off, I want to just honor Brenda again. That was just beautiful. And I want to especially call attention to the ethos implied in what you've given us and the integrity you're asking us to live out these values in some really chosen ways, which is what this requires. And I just think that's just beautiful. So yeah, I wanted to just offer a tiny bit about me, a little bit. I think, thank you very much, Dan, for saying that brief intro. And yes, my work is definitely intrigued. I'm fascinated by the intersections of neurodivergence and technology, because here we are. And because of my own issues with disability, both some that I probably kind of landed, in this body on, and then others that maybe I've acquired along the way. And that takes me into how I started my capstone talk in person, which was just to look out and sort of see through the journey of time for what got me to school. 25 years prior, my partner had passed from AIDS. Two other men that I love dearly also had passed. And I lost basically most of all my friends. And the Plato quote I used at the time was to just kind of encapsulate it: be kind to all, because everyone we face, everyone, is having some interior battle that we know practically nothing about. And what are these disabilities? Could age and infirmity be a new added on disability? There's so many there's disabilities in training that often neuro non-divergent people don't even know that they're going to be having later on in life. And I think the ultimate disability in a way is attitudinal, when we're not really honoring the journey that everyone has to take. So I just want to applaud everybody here for all of what you're doing. Okay, I just wanted to briefly just, again, just super quickly state regarding that concept. Well, I'll come back to that at the end. Let me move into the slides, if I could. I'm going to try my best to share the screen. I'm on my partner's screen because my computer decided to have a problem today. So can you all hear me? Am I talking too fast, too slow? I can. If I do, just please let me know. Let me just jump back to you for a second. I can't actually see you now that I'm sharing. Dan, can you hear? Am I coming through okay? I think
yes,
I am.
You are. You're good.
Okay, thank you. So as mentioned, I am really fascinated with the concept of looking at metacognition. And one reason why is because I have my own neurodivergence issues. I looked, by the way, at on the Google Doc of everyone who had different titles, talks. And I'm one of two people who put our titles in all caps. Why would I do that? Because I actually see it. I might actually miss the words if they weren't in all caps due to some ADHD, or was it the meningitis, or it really doesn't matter. This is just what works for me. But how do we communicate that to educators, and how do educators sort of triage to get, or the people who facilitate education, triage and prioritize what's needed in a very fast-paced environment, especially in academic online spaces? And these are the inquiries I'm kind of interested in. So here's just a nice little image that kind of, it's sort of a Maslow's hierarchy kind of brought over into reading proficiency. I like the model. I'm not planting a flag on it, but I think at least it gives us an idea that metacognition is an added on skill that is sort of acculturated or acquired over time with learning. It's not instant, right? If as I work with second language learners from my time in Japan or other places, I'm working with people's attention to phonological awareness, to issues of how the pronunciation is coming across that they might not be aware of, what's going to move them best forward. And that's obviously not reading comprehension at the academic level. So we're building skill upon skill upon skill by the time we get second language learners in particular into academic digital environments, digital reading environments for academic spaces. That's a very interesting nexus of places to come into. And I think what it does is it often exposes concerns that the L2 learner or student reader might not have known they've had. For example, there are multiple kinds of color blindness. I have several. And does that actually factor in when there is something being designed? Have universal design principles been involved in the creation of that content space? Excuse me. Okay, having a little technology issue here. Oh, there we go. I sure hope, well, I'm just going to hope that I see. All right, so I've just already covered some of what I've talked about in terms of my background. We're obviously talking, if I could, here about the evolution from print into digital reading spaces, and also the evolving models of metacognition to kind of help student readers transition into reading spaces. Of course, some of the theory of that came long before digital, and I'm quite interested in what actually transitions well in terms of the psychology traditions for scaffolding student readers, L2, second language learner, L2 readers in academic spaces, and maybe what needs to come along that hasn't happened yet. I'm also looking at some interesting issues in terms of barriers to access that are either not yet addressed in terms of a UDL principle, or actually have new problems created in digital spaces, such as libraries that no longer have second optional versions that would help for people with neurodivergence. Whereas in face-to-face, for example, there might have been training, and I'll get into that might have been available for other options for teaching people metacognitive strategies for research and reading. Okay, this is me, believe it or not, in the 1980s. This is my first time through in university. And that's what it looked like. That's prehistoric Google. That's what we use. And I got to say, as hard as it was back then, as hard as it was to be a not yet out young bi man, I loved the budding life of the mind that was possible. I think that's kind of what we all do. We're not just encountering the education, we're encountering ourselves. And here was this magical system that you sent away for through interlibrary loan, and in 2-3 weeks, sometimes quite a bit longer, a magical Christmas present would arrive, and you get this notification that something that you wanted in your research project had arrived. Was it as good as what we have now? No, in a lot of ways, no. But there was a personal investment that went into it that was profound. And there was a way that mattered that I miss. Okay, part of my screen is a little bit hidden by, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing everything on my partner's screen. But so as you can see, as I returned to school, this is sort of some of what I saw. It was complicated. It was tricky. This is an example of perusal in a wonderful course on college instruction of college reading at a community college level. Absolutely loved it. What I can say, though, is how I imagine, if without actually doing the show of hands, I bet most of you have either been somebody who's printed out the readings assigned from a class and then taken markers to them or written them up on an actual paper, or known people who do that, or know people who do that. This is an example of a screenshot that I took for this particular class, and you can already see that this is probably a pre-digital era reading that has been scanned, but with the best job done, and I could answer questions if anybody's interested. On the technology side, there are ways of cleaning up print that's hard to read, but if it was already askew, it's going to be difficult to get that to come through. Now, without changing screens, just to keep it easy, I'm going to ask you to imagine 3 different marked up colors on this same reading, because imagine you're reading this through a portal on a class reading site. And maybe you don't quite yet know how to turn on and off the toggles for each individual person's markings. I didn't until about halfway through the class. And I was having to negotiate other people's readings and other people's comments on the side, or having to go find those sometimes. And I couldn't hear my own reading, that precious life of the mind that is so needed for every learner to take their journey. So those became impediments that I didn't know that I would have in the intersection of ADHD, executive function issues, head trauma, etc. These became issues where I had too much going on in my head to sort of store in the short-term memory what I was looking at. For a brief history, metacognition comes out of the psychology tradition. You probably all know that it's very important to the TESOL, that's teaching English as a second language to speakers of other languages, I should say. It was early adopted because it is so pivotal for helping learners. Sort of, it's a turnkey that just it gives one. It's all self-created, I should say, but one can model it and practice it in classroom settings, and then help students ultimately discover whatever scaffolding is going to best help them to create that type of metacognitive strategy. However, as you know, I'm going to be arguing that these are not things that are automatically taught. And in fact, much of what has been used in previous pre-digital times is sort of, we're in a wait period. We haven't really adopted enough new strategies, and learners are often left in a system, not just in classrooms, but in a campus-wide system that completely leaves them out. So I like this concept of reading in these spaces in an ongoing process of being redefined. And the reason I picked this picture, I think it's a nice dichotomy. In my first time at SF State, there were far more books on the ground floor level to look at, and that just felt like friends. Now there are more and more workstations, and in fact, you can check out computers. You don't really see the kind of computer with the person in the background there, but all of it is in a radical period of being recreated. So the computers are portable. The accesses might be through a QR. Does that learner understand or have the technological wealth to access that QR to get to the training that will help them use the computer for the research at that library? These are hidden questions that are implicit in the system. They're more or less easy to onboard for undergraduates, especially people who are, quote, digital natives who grow up with these technologies in their houses. But what if it's andragogy? What if it's teaching adults that transition into these places, discover that they had dyslexia or other forms of reading concern and didn't know those, and then are suddenly slammed with a fast-paced online learning reading environment? I love the quote below. Reading, according to Shori and Mokhtari, is a cognitive process which readers use using their prior knowledge and reading strategies to grasp a written text. And Teresa Diaz really, for me, nails what metacognition is. The simple elevator version definition would be it's thinking about thinking. But I like the idea that it is a dialogue, that there is a constant ongoing awareness of self as learner, self as, I would say, journeyer. In this model, this is something that is kind of a classic model coming out of psychology traditions. We're taking metacognitive strategies, and we're looking at four main areas: connecting new to old information, selecting the strategies that are going to be best used in thinking through reading, planning and monitoring the reading in active real time, and then looking back and evaluating our results. So you might think of taking those highlighters and writing on the side and asking questions and arguing with the text, taking ownership of the text. Those would be metacognitive strategies that will help sync that knowledge, not only the original source material, but our own responses to that material. One of my problems with reading through an online portal is that I can't capture my thoughts fast enough. I have transitioned into keyboarding, but I basically choose to download whenever possible. And I urge instructors to make this possible as an option in your classes. Please let students download the text themselves. If you do require them to add comments into an online reading portal, please give them the chance to download the text separately, to be able to insert comments. I would actually literally transfer my documents from PDF format into Word so that I could take the self-created scaffolding that I needed for this metacognitive learning that I need to do And I would write my comments in, capturing them right as I had them. Otherwise, I would lose them. And so that's my strategy. And then I would export those back into the site. But as you can imagine, that's probably week 8 in a class of however many weeks that I eventually learned how to create that model. Imagine having to add a second language or learning through a second language on into that issue. Okay, here's another brief model I love. Just the planning, the monitoring, and the evaluating. I think it's very clean and simple and basically at the core of what metacognition requires. And in terms of the last of the famous models, the global, the problem solving, and the support, they do interconnect. I think it's really lovely to look at that way, that these all can be going on at the same time in cognitive, metacognitive strategies. Older models sort of looked at us as looking at this as cycling through, starting perhaps with global or problem solving, moving on into support. And support doesn't just mean reaching out to others, reaching out to that research librarian or the instructor and say, I'm not sure how to find, these seem like specialized terms. Where can I get access to these? Or I'm not understanding all the kinds of questions one would ask. Support can be something you ask of yourself. Support can be your own research path to getting the kinds of questions that you might have or the issues you're having dealt with. Okay, moving into the digital spaces of that, it's clear that information seeking through an internet space is really a nexus event. It's where we meet almost really daily, and not just in our work, but in our entertainment, in our social media. It is a kind of a digital commons, right? The public commons is almost in a digital space, but it's extremely amorphous, it's very fast paced, and it's very anonymizing. So our problems can be anonymous. First off, they might not even be known to second language learners. Again, as you grow in your ability to read more complex text, you might understand that there might be neurodivergence issues or issues related to age or to acquired disability, such as I have with some head trauma issue. Those are things that you might not realize are going to intersect and powerfully impact your learning. And so you might not even know to ask for the help. And by the time you need that help, the class has moved on. The people that you were able to meet before perhaps have moved on, and you're not perhaps aware of even how to go find them. I'll be coming back to that. In this, there are a lot of assumptions about L2 readers in academic spaces. The first one is that social media confers literacy in academic spaces. In other words, that, oh, they'll be fine. They're on Twitter or they're on Facebook all the time. The next one would be to be looking at digital skills, that these are treated separately and that there is compounding effect because not enough attention is given, in my opinion, in academic spaces to orientation early on in most of these L2 academic readers' academic careers. They might be transitioning from junior colleges, and somewhere along the way, there are gaps in that education that just get assumed. First and low-income English for academic purpose readers are very likely to have multiple literacy issues. Reason being for that, because there are gaps again in the education, and perhaps that person doesn't have time to know that they're having 3 kinds of color blindness or any of the other types of many kinds of concerns that might be intersecting here. I've had students that I taught that showed up to conversation and other English classes, and they were taking breaks in Chinatown and watching their class through an iPhone or a smartphone. That's not going to give them access to the ability to interact and look at online reading in a real-time class environment or non-real-time anywhere near at the level needed. And they might not know to have that the idea that they could go to the library and check out a computer for free is even an option. Okay, I'd like to just offer that effect In other words, how you're feeling about what you're reading. Motivation and metacognition are absolutely inextricably linked. They certainly are to me. I'm sure you all know that feeling too, of being demotivated when something about a system that you're learning or the social relationship is just sort of overwhelming. So knowing that these are, in a way, the times I have punished myself in my journey for not being fast enough to get on board with things is as much a part of my disabilities at times as what students experience just in learning new systems. In this space for new digital reading, new challenges, there is new growth. I'm actually very excited about it. I'm very hopeful about it. I'm also very passionate that we need to keep carving out, looking at how UDL, Universal Design for Learning, can help intersect with budding academic student readers. So again, these spaces are exciting. And I think even with the adult learners that I've taught, many of them are super excited about interacting in academic spaces. The problem is that once we get off screen and we get into all the many places to click on our various portals, and let's face it, we all know that the various LMSs, learning management systems, are going to change and change again. And they have already in my academic career about three major changes at SF State alone. So those are the kinds of things that are even harder for people who are of other languages and maybe facing disability concerns. And I just want to offer, how do we help these people? I really love the new literacy model. I think it's correct that there are, as I believe all you do too, that there are other discourses going on. There are other aspects of this. There's really an ethos change that's required, a social practice change, not just here's technology, here's how you use it, but giving them as part of their metacognition, you deserve to get the help you need. That is a shot in the arm of encouragement that can go light years. Okay, just kind of blowing through here a little bit. 35 years of metacognitive strategy training. Most of this was self-reported. A lot of it, in my opinion, conflated terms, had strong print bias, and I'm all for print, but I do believe there was a lot of bias and that there were poor study designs. A lot of that had apple and orange comparison issues going on, and newer tests are beginning to emerge, looking at meta-analyses, but having more fine-tuned ways of looking at things. Okay, these are not actively taught skills, metacognition, especially for L2 readers in digital spaces. And I want to just call attention to the database searching. I'll be coming back to that in a second, but you probably already know, if students are looking, if you go onto your library research site, even our library research systems do something very similar to Google. They have this right side column that says, have you looked at this? Have you looked at this? It is so hard for me to not look at that and try to find that mythical bottom to something that doesn't exist. And I imagine if that's true for me and I'm working through the L1, imagine how that might be for somebody who doesn't know that that's yet an issue in their lives. Synthesizing across articles between disciplines and looking at multiple forms of new literacy texts, that includes video. These are things that might overwhelm people, but they might not have encountered these things before, so they might think that they're just wrong. So it's obvious that we're not going back. This is the place we live now. It needs to get more, in my opinion, the support must be extended school-wide. This needs to become a culture of support in admissions, in financial aid, for the videos explainers that are on library websites more and more. Very few of them at my school as yet are in any L2s. There's only one on a library site in Spanish. Okay, emerging scholarship is showing that training really does help. And I think I've covered this mostly. It can be learned. It can be even learned, absolutely even learned. I'm living proof that students that work through disability can work to find their own scaffolding. It is self-created, but instructors need to build in, I believe we need to build in a culture of modeling and valuing the kinds of scaffolding, self-created scaffolding and metacognitive practices that are possible. These can be done through Think Aloud protocols, through cohort practice, and again, with institutional cultural valuing of these concepts. And they must be done beyond a single term. This is not a one and done. This is an iterative practice that comes slowly, is accrued slowly over time. Okay, I had two tutees I want to show just briefly here during this program. Zhu was a hidden polymath. She was basically wasted and flushed out of her Singapore high school, not Singapore, pardon me, Chinese high school. She just got turned off. And then when she came here, she discovered that she not only loved learning English, she passionately loved learning. And she went on to learn Spanish. She did 2 different programs at the same time. She became the student of the month at Jefferson Adult High School. And none of that was known to her. It was hiding. But she was able to transition fairly well into the digital environment. Tak, on the other hand, he's 74, absolutely wonderful person. He struggled with dyslexia, or what seemed to be signs. We only met in the COVID period online, but it appeared that there were issues, dyslexia issues that he had not known about. And as I actually got to have a librarian that helped me with this program show up for my talk on this in person, and it was such an honor. And to hear her tell me that she herself printed out her PDFs in her undergrad just reminds me that in a way, disability isn't so much the way to look at this. I was going to use a story earlier, but I'll just insert it now. One time, long ago, when I taught in Japan, I met a young Japanese kid who told me, I asked him on the bus, how are your English studies going? Because I was there to teach English, and I knew that was what high school students do. And the student said, oh, no, blind students don't study English. And I was so unhappy with that answer. I'm dissatisfied. I was unhappy to see that the crosswalks in Japan that had the sounds so that blind people could follow them were turned off at dusk, because why would blind people go out after dark after all? Or that the elevators for accessibility were turned off at a certain hour. It's that kind of mindset that where are these places turned off in our system that we need to find? Where are the broken places that we need to either turn back on or build into the structures that we work through? And it can't just be done in a classroom. It has to be done campus and school-wide.
Robert, I'm going to give you a little time check here to wrap up, if you will.
Yes, I'm going to blow through. Here's quickly databases. More schools are using ways to get those accessible. Here's our new library without books. And here are 3 amalgamations of sites showing how hard it is for L2 learners to find videos. Again, as I mentioned, there's only one available now for how to use the research system in Spanish. It was just added last month. And there it is. And there's that person I used to meet. We used to have a computer that I would work with right next to her during my undergrad. And she would, as I was saying about what instructors can do, she instructed me on my metacognition without me knowing it. I was able to, her computer was slaved to her main computer, and I could model and follow the way she recommended I do research. That person no longer exists. That desk is there, but it's now a chat system. And you can imagine if you have issues with an L2 and a disability, how hard that might be. That's what that desk looks like now. Okay, I think I'm going to have to leave it there. There's a tiny little bit in there more for you. This is how I eventually came to export my PDFs, turning them into Word documents. You can see that the large all caps are my words talking back to the text. In a way, metacognition and reading in these spaces is asking, what's in it for me, and how can I invest myself in this in a path that works for each learner? Well, thank you very much. These are a few links to me and my journey, and it's been such a pleasure to get to share this with you all today.